Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Abdul Basit Abu Laila welcomes you and wishes you a good time as well as a better understanding of the universe. This is our episode of our vision towards a new understanding of the universe. We are here to speak about the universe. We are here in order to discuss some matters about the universe, but we must be careful that here we aren't going to repeat what has been said, what is studied and taught everywhere, or what has been introduced to theories, whether to be ancient or modern. In fact, our aim is to present a quite new vision about this universe. A vision through which we can achieve a comprehensive, coherent, and mature understanding to the construction of this universe and how it works. A vision that may contain answers for many unanswered cosmic questions yet. Let's first ask, have we understood the universe yet? Fact, all that we can say is that so far we've got only some information about the universe accumulated along centuries. But whatever valuable the information humanity has achieved, it's clear that this knowledge we've got is still scattered and characterized by a good deal of shortcomings, fallacies, and contradictions, whether in regard to the essentials of the universe or to its still hidden secrets. Consequently, in order to offer a more mature vision of the construction of the universe and how it works, we have to review or reconsider the available information about certain universal phenomena, besides introducing some quite new ideas, or we can call discoveries, about other universal phenomena that haven't yet been traced or discussed through the different scientific institutions interested in the science of the universe. The issues that need being revised can be specified in the following topics. Number one, the regulations of the universal movement. Number two, the regulations of the universal gravity. Number three, the mechanism through which solar groups and galaxies are formed. Number four, the conception of the expansion of the universe. These are topics that have already and abundantly been dealt with by modern science. But we do think that all of them are in need of shedding a new light over them. All these topics are still wrapped with a good deal of vagueness and ambiguity, regardless of how great studies introduced so far. Besides, there are other new ideas concerning other new phenomena that can be specified in the following topics. Number five, the activity of planets and other celestial particles within a solar system. Number six, the form and construction of the universe. How is the universe like? What is the form of that universe? 7. Source of matter in the universe. 8. Where we can find biological life throughout the universe. Number 9 and last, the major factors that control the world of matter. In fact, these topics are interrelated with each other, so it will be difficult to deal with a certain topic separately. We may be in need of discussing more than one topic together. We will discuss all these topics in detail through successive episodes. And our target is to arrive at the real technique of that universe. We can't pretend that we are going to penetrate the whole truth of that universe. This is something difficult to be achieved at this age of the human development, at this period of the human development. But we can't pretend that through understanding these issues, we will have achieved an imminent jump on the path of the truth of our universe. Now, before proceeding through broader universal issues, we must examine our solar system accurately and discover what hasn't been discovered yet. So, our start will be with the first issue of the second group, whose title is The Activity of Planets and Other Celestial Particles Within a Solar System. As we see, what is the conduct of planets within a solar system? What is the policy of the solar system? How does a solar system work? The available human knowledge that has been achieved and decided on scientifically so far about the planets within a solar system is that each planet performs an orbital movement around the sun called revolution. Besides an axial movement, which is called rotation, it is available also that there's a kind of gravity that connects all celestial particles with the sun and connects all celestial particles with each other. It's available also that the speed of revolution increases as we get nearer to the sun due to an increase of the power of gravity. It's clear that while scientists have wonderfully dealt with revolution in regard of its motive and the majority of its circumstances, there is a clear shortage of information about rotation in regard to its motive and its regulations. This is apart from a good deal of information about minor astronomical phenomena that we are not interested in our research here. Now, is this information we have just mentioned, is that information all that can be known about the activity of planets within a solar system? Or in other words, is this all activity practiced by a planet within a solar system? Is the activity of planets limited to revolution, rotation, gravity, and the other minor astronomical phenomena, still there are many unanswered questions. For instance, why are planets different from each other concerning their physical and chemical structure? Why are some planets rocky while others are gaseous? What are the factors controlling the discrepancy among planets? Why are the rocky planets near to the sun, while the gaseous planets are far away? Why are there are planets that are characterized by excellent chemical specifications, while others have quite poor specifications with a limited number of chemical light elements? Why is there only one planet containing living beings? What about the other planets? Why does the day on Earth get shorter and shorter as we go back on the past? These questions, and there are others, if we can't be guided to the real answer for these questions, we must confess that our knowledge about the universe is too primitive. Now, it's our task to find real answers for these significant questions. Fact: although our research is concerned mainly with pure material issues, it will be helpful to enter from a biological direction. It's clear that man's attention has recently been directed towards the planet Mars, searching for life over there. This can be easily noticed through the permanent space trips being sent to that neighboring planet from many countries through the last few decades. Our question now is there a biological life on Mars? Scientifically, in order to answer this question, we must first know what a biological life is, and how and where it can arise. In other words, we are urgently in need of a scientific definition to biological life, a definition from which we can deduce where we can find it and how we must search for it. Let's undoubtedly agree that this is the scientific definition of living beings or of the biological life, which says a biological life is a natural and inevitable outcome of certain chemical, physical, and climatic circumstances, and it develops according to the development of these circumstances. This is the definition of living beings from an evolutionary point of view, and we mustn't disagree much about that. By chemical circumstances, we just mean the availability of certain chemical elements. And the more available chemical elements we have, the more and more complicated living beings or living species arise. By physical circumstances, we mean that the available chemical elements and compounds should be found on the major three states of matter: solid or rocky, liquid, and gas, side by side. And by climatic circumstances, we mean that there is a certain range of temperature through which living organisms can arise and grow. This temperature through which living organisms is that which available on planet Earth and which is estimated from minus 89.2 centigrade minimum to 57.8 centigrade maximum. Kinds of evolving living beings are directly proportional with that range of temperature. If this range is available together with the responsive chemical and physical circumstances, the inevitable result will be the evolving of all kinds of living organisms. If this range gets lower, we'll get only minor living kinds belonging to the kingdoms of viruses and protists, and it gets much lower. If it gets much lower, no living kinds are allowed to evolve. On the other hand, if this range gets higher, the expected result will be the gradual extinction of all living species with a gradual increase of this range. This is how to think when you want to consider the probability of the existence of a biological life anywhere. Expecting to find an animal or even a plant life at a climatic and physical circumstances that are different from the conditions of Earth is something of scientific absurdity, which represents only a waste of time, effort, and resources. Simply, your search mustn't be blind. It must be built on certain illuminating rules. The existence of a biological life depends totally on certain chemical, physical, and climatic considerations. Now, back to planet Mars. It's clear now that Mars and the moons of Jupiter must be currently out of a developed biological life due to physical and chemical and climatic considerations. Nevertheless, this doesn't prevent the probability of the existence of the simplest form of living beings, which are viruses, according to the probability of the existence of the initial chemical and physical ingredients suitable for this kind of living beings. We think that the final opinion of researchers in this regard indicates that the ingredients required for evolving virus life is already available on Mars. And they concluded from that Mars must either actually contain a biological life currently, or that it contained life in the far past, or that it will be a station of life in the far future. This is something very important, and we agree on this thesis, and we must take care because all these researchers are doing their best in order to discover the origin of life. Okay. We have indicated clearly that it's impossible to find any sort of plant or animal biological life currently on Mars due to its irresponsive physical and climatic considerations. Then, what about the past of Mars? In fact, there had been no trace of life either on Mars or on the other farther celestial objects in the past. Thinking in this way means that we are searching blindly and from a reverse direction. We have made it clear that a biological life is bound to certain chemical, physical, and climatic specifications. Consequently, in order to guess whether there was life on or not on Mars in the past, requires that we should be guided to know how that planet was in the past, chemically, physically, and climatically. And the answer is that The state of Mars in the far past was like the current state of the planet Jupiter, while its state in the far future will be like the current state of the planet Earth. The same thing is applied to Earth and any other planet. Earth was like Mars in the far past and will be like planet Venus in the future, and so on. This is our theory, and we want to convey it through this research. What does this mean? In fact, this means that now we are before the first two new significant facts concerning the conduct of any planet within a solar system. Two facts that haven't yet been traced by any scientific agency. Okay. The first fact is that a planet is an ultimately developing celestial object. And please underline developing. Okay? We know that the classic view adopted all over the world with all its agencies concerned in studying the physics of the universe considers that when the planets emerged in the past, they appeared with the same state that characterizes them now, whether chemically or physically. This is a classic adopted view which is no longer acceptable nor liable to normal understanding. That classical view doesn't show why our solar system, which originated from the same collapsing star as pretended, contain different kinds of planets in regard of their chemical and physical structure. It doesn't also show why the rocky planets are near to the sun, to the center of the solar system, why the gas planets are far from it. It doesn't also show why animal and plant life on Earth appeared only 100 or 200 million years, or in other suggestions, 600 million years, while they estimate its age as 4.53 billion years. And other issues. In fact, later on, and in a following episode, we'll display another mechanism of how the solar system is usually formed. A mechanism that is entirely different from the adopted classical mechanism, which depends on the collapse or the explosion of a huge star supernova. In this current episode, it's sufficient to refer to that all planets are usually born in the same essential state, which is the fiery state, like any star. Then they develop into a gaseous dark state, then they develop into liquid rocky state, and then they develop into a dry rocky state, after which they start to vanish until they disappear totally from existence. This is a technique followed by planets. And now, the decisive question is, what does it mean that a planet transfers from a gaseous state into a rocky state? How? How can this happen? From gaseous to rocks, sand, dust, mud. Simply means that a planet acquires new chemical elements along millions of years. The subsequent other decisive one is, where does a planet acquire new chemical elements? Okay. Again, where does a planet acquire new chemical elements? And this question will be exposed, the answer of which will be exposed after introducing the second imminent new fact. So let's now turn to the second fact and then return back to the process or the operation of the development of the self-development of planets. The second fact is that each planet performs a constant slow movement directly towards the sun, besides revolution and rotation. Again, the classic adopted view considers that the orbits of planets have ever been stable, and that the distance between any planet and the sun has always been stable since the first emergence of the solar system. This is not right. The fact is that there is a third movement performed by planets besides revolution and rotation. Besides revolution and rotation, each planet gets nearer to the sun through a very slow movement towards the sun. The third movement can be called the approaching one, the approaching movement, by which we mean approaching towards the sun. This direct movement, although very slow, plays the most important part, the most important role in determining the destiny of the planet and in understanding its history, and subsequently understanding how the solar system works and how the whole universe works. So now we are before a new idea. Now we are before a new movement, a third movement. How did we know that there is a third movement performed by each planet and any minor celestial body? Okay? What are the evidences of the existence of the third planetary motion? We have got 4 evidences. Number 1, biological and climatic evidence. Tell me, please, what does it mean that the planet Earth is the only planet in the solar system that contains biological life? What is the benefit of other planets? And what is the secret of their origin and existence? It is known that the planet Earth is the only planet in our solar system that contains biological life. But it is also known that the plant and animal life had started on Earth only for 600 million years of its life, which has been estimated to be about 4.56 million years, with keeping in mind that this number, which is scientifically approved to determine the age or the lifetime of Earth, is 100% wrong. Simply because, if correct, it only determines the rocky age of Earth. But Earth had existed billions of years before the formation of the rocks. So, why didn't animal and plant life on Earth arise before only 600 million years? Besides, it's also known from geological history that the planet Earth, before life was created on it, was an icy planet like Mars. So why was it an icy planet? Answer: it was an icy planet because it was not in its current orbit, which would not allow it to be completely covered with ice. It was icy because its temperature then was quite low. And it was low because Earth was farther from the sun. The climatic conditions of any planet depend on one thing, which is the distance between that planet and the sun. This is the reason why life on Earth did not arise before 600 million years. Therefore, there is no explanation for the transformation of the Earth from an icy planet and its climatic moderation, except that it was in an orbit farther than its current orbit millions of years ago, and then crawled or creeped inwards until it reached its current orbit. And therefore, that is the law of the planets in general. It is the steady, slow movement towards the sun. This slow movement of convergence towards the sun also explains to you how life, when it began on Earth, began in its simplest form. The gradation in the production of living organisms from the simplest to the most complex depends on the gradation of the level of maturity that the planet attains. To the extent to which the planet has achieved physical and chemical maturity based on a climatic level, the planet produces living organisms. At the beginning of producing living organisms, the Earth produced viruses and bacteria and what is known biologically as primitives and protists, then fungi. Then it began to produce more complex organisms based on the development of maturity, developmental maturity reached. And the main controller in this progression in the production of organisms from the simplest to the most developed is the Earth's temperature and the extent of what is available of chemical elements. That is, the more advanced organism did not evolve from the bacterial organisms that arose much earlier. It appeared after it on Earth only because it arose after it. The production of more advanced organisms arose after the Earth's temperatures rose, and after the Earth acquired new chemical properties. And the temperature did not rise until the Earth approached the sun or the sun approached the Earth. As for the supposition of that it is the sun that approaches the planets, either by crawling or by steady increase in its size, this is a very weak assumption because, number one, it is inconceivable that the sun is creeping towards the planets by all scales, since it is the attracting factor, not the attracted one, due to its excessive mass compared to the mass of all the planets. Number two, it is also inconceivable to assume that the size of the sun may increase at the present time, because the sun is still hydrogen forming, and inflation will not occur in the size of the sun except after the entire hydrogen has been burned and transform it into heavier elements, which is a matter that needs billions of years according to the estimation of specialists. Undoubtedly, there are other explanations for the fact that the Earth was an icy planet in the past. Explanation that mostly depend on the element of sudden and on cosmic chaos that is not subject to fixed laws. For instance, the scientific interpretation available, for example, indicates that the planet Earth was a natural rocky planet before it was covered by ice only a few 100 million years ago. And that it was covered by ice. It was covered with ice as a result of the blowing of cosmic snowstorms on it, and the ice covered it for a few million years. This is the adopted view now by science. So let's ask, where did these snowstorms come from? How is it possible that there may be interplanetary storms? How did these storms penetrate these distances toward the sun without being affected by the heat of the sun, but rather challenged it and covered the planet for several millions of years? Is the idea of blowing snow winds crossing planets belong to cosmic habits that are known and subject to observation? This is the biological and the climatic evidence of the planet, the third planetary movement. Number two, developing evidence. We previously concluded that every planet, but every dark celestial body undergoes a natural process of developing at the chemical, physical, and climatic level. This evolutionary process in itself is a strong evidence of that the planets are creeping regularly towards the sun, along with their axial and orbital movements. How can this develop? How can this development process be used as an evidence of planets and other objects regularly creeping towards the sun? The issue is very simple, which is that if the planets are auto-developing from a gaseous state to a rocky one, and if the gaseous planets are farther from the sun, while the rocky ones are close to the sun, this is the best evidence that all the planets travel regularly from outside the solar system towards the sun during their development. And this is the third planetary movement. It is the movement of convergence towards the sun. In other words, and in the opposite sense, this linear movement is what explains the meaning of the presence of gas planets far from the sun, while the rocky liquid planets are closer to the sun, while the dry rocky planets are the closest. Number three, we have a historical evidence taken from the history of Earth. According to the history of Earth, it's known that the day of Earth gets shorter successively as we go back on the past. What is the explanation of this? This has only one clear explanation, which is that the Earth's orbit around the sun is not stable at a certain distance between the Earth and the sun, as supposed by the great majority of researchers so far. If we follow the order of the rotation movement, which produces the time of the day along all planets, we find that this movement gets faster regularly as we get farther from the sun. Rotation is clearly reversely proportional with revolution. This clearly indicates that when the day of Earth was shorter than the current day, Earth was far away from the current orbit. And that Earth has been in a state of creeping towards the sun since then until it reached its current orbit, and it is natural that it is still creeping. No doubt, there are other explanations for the regular shortness of the Earth's day whenever we go back in the distant past. The scientific analysis adopted in this regard explains the shortness of the day in the far past as a result of the nearness between the moon and the Earth. And here we have a big fallacy. In fact, nearness of particles to each other usually leads into a slowness of rotation, not to fastness. That's because the nearness of two gravitated particles leads into an increase in the speed of revolution. And it's clear that rotation is reversely proportional with revolution. Other opinions indicate that Earth in the past was in a state of turmoil and instability due to the forces of gravity surrounding it, which was pushing it to change its orbit near and far without an understandable basis, until it finally settled in its current orbit. This is not the case, and the planets are not and will never be in a state of random disturbance. Fourth evidence is the evidence of the general universal law. What do we mean? If we imagine that the orbits of the planets are absolutely stable, it means that we are still very primitive in understanding the universe, as our ancestors had believed in the stability of Earth. In fact, it isn't suitable that there is anything stable in the universe as a whole. If we believe that the distances between the planets and the sun are absolutely stable distances and the orbits do not budge, it means that we have violated the general cosmic law, which clearly states that there is nothing stable in the universe, whether to be an object or a state. And we will never be able to know the secret of the distance of the rocky and gassy planets. We will not be able to know how the planet developed from a state into another, how life arose on it, and how planets' life ends and perishes from existence. And other simply, our universe is dynamic, not static. Now, let's discuss the motives of the approaching movement. The motives of the third planetary movement. We are all aware of the motives and circumstances of the orbital movement and the planets around the sun, and that it is controlled by solar gravity. It is known that the sun attracts the planets and other solar and other components of the solar system with a certain force, and that this level of attraction is weak farther away from the sun while it gets stronger closer to it. it is supposed that this attractive force leads the planets heading in a direct linear direction toward the sun. But this direct linear motion is transformed into an orbital motion by another factor, which is the centrifugal force emanating from the rotation of the sun around itself. Meaning that when the planets collide with the centrifugal force, they are bound to convert their path from the direct linear direction to the orbital direction around the centrifugal force surrounding the sun. The orbital motion is just a compensation for direct linear motion. So, we have two factors controlling orbital motion: the power of attraction or gravity and the centrifugal force. The power of attraction attracts the planet towards the sun, but it doesn't turn directly towards it or for in it, because the centrifugal force pushes it away in a direction opposite to the direction of attraction. Many seekers do believe that the centrifugal force must be equal to the force of attraction as a rule in itself, and for the planet to stabilize in its orbit. And here lies a major dilemma in both cases. There is no certainty that the centrifugal force must be equal to the force of attraction as a constant rule, because the motives of the two forces is not the same. Rather, each force has a different motive, even though the sun creates both. So, the force of attraction is controlled by certain motives, while the force of repulsion is controlled by another different motive. On the other hand, the equality of the two forces does not lead to the stability of the planet in a specific orbit, but rather the opposite is true. Since the two forces do not originate from the same cause, there is no inevitability that they should be equal. Rather, we are forced with two probabilities. Either the two forces are equal, or one of them is stronger than the other. And in each possibility, the results differ clearly regarding the nature of the movement of the planet. So, the centrifugal force is either equal to the force of gravity, or higher than it, or less than it. What happens in each case? Number one, if the repulsive force is equal to the force of gravity, it means that the total product of the forces equals zero. That is, the repulsive force will nullify the force of attraction, and thus there will be no orbital motion. More precisely, the planet will lose its kinetic energy and be vulnerable to fall in any direction toward the nearest attracting point in the universe. Number two, if the repulsive force is higher than the force of attraction, it means that the force of attraction has also been cancelled, and therefore there will be no orbital movement, while the repulsive force will push the planet away from the sun in a regular movement to the outside of the solar system. Number three, if the repulsive force is less than the force of attraction, this will result in an orbital movement, and since the repulsive force is less than the attractive force, it is natural that there will be a straight movement inward besides. What happens realistically in our solar system is that there is actually an orbital motion, which means that the repulsive force is less than the force of attraction. And therefore, there is a creeping movement inward besides the orbital motion. The speed of this movement equals to the difference between the force of attraction and the centrifugal force, and it is directly proportional with the orbital movement. Now, let's stop here for this episode with a promise to meet soon in another one to complete discussing the second fact about the evolution of planets. A fact that is related to where a planet usually acquires new chemical specifications. Thank you and goodbye.